Welcome to the Neuro Diaries podcast. I'm your host, Jade Rose, writer, speaker, and mental health advocate. This podcast is a safe space where we can amplify our voices together. My mission is to make the world a safer and happier place for neurodivergent children and those struggling with mental health conditions and mental illness. The Neuro Diaries podcast acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land. I'd like to pay respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. This episode was recorded on Narrego country. This podcast openly discusses mental health issues and may contain content that is distressing for some. Please take care in deciding if this content is right for you today. Breaking stigma through stories. Welcome to the Neuro Diaries podcast. Hello and welcome back to the Neuro Diaries. I've got Joanne Almonte-Mason here with me today. I'm super excited to get into this chat with Joanne. Joanne's a writer. She's currently querying a novel that she's written called On Shadow's Ledge, and she also puts together a newsletter about that writing journey. So a great way to get hints and tips and just follow the process, the very mysterious and hidden process about what it actually takes to write a book. And hopefully get it published. So welcome, Joanne.
Hello. Excited to speak to you today.
Thanks for being here. Before we start, I wanted to find out a little bit more about your book. I've been following your journey along on Instagram, and it sounds quite similar themes to my own work in progress called Hearts of Glass, with a sort of young woman becoming aware of and coming to terms with a bipolar diagnosis and sort of the upheavals of that journey. So definitely sounds like something I want to read. Can you introduce us to it a little bit?
Sure thing. So On Shadow's Ledge follows a college senior. So she's about to go into the real world, and she has a boyfriend, she has good grades, she has great friends, everything is going according to plan. And then she starts experiencing auditory hallucinations. So she starts hearing voices, and they're really prompting her to do just out of character things, just not something very risky behavior, let's just say. And she doesn't really know how to stop herself. Like, you can tell in the story that she knows what she's doing is wrong, but she still does it. So she gets into a whole bunch of mayhem, and then a precipice happens in the book where her parents have to intervene. And they basically think, the only way they can help her is to admit her into like a 72-hour psych hold. So they do that. She goes through an assessment, and she's diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder. So the remainder of the book is her trying to navigate the diagnosis and trying to accept and not accept, really, what it all means for her. And she's just trying to get her life together. So it's just kind of her journey through the diagnosis and things like that.
I am here for that. I love it. That sounds awesome. Excited to read about the chaotic nature of her journey. Is any of this based on your sort of lived experience with the condition, would you say?
Yes, I'm very much, my thought process is very much sharing my lived experiences through my stories. So I woke up at 2:00 in the morning, one very early morning, in a manic state, and took out my phone and just started writing. I wrote 4 chapters without really thinking about it. And the next morning I was like, did that really happen? And I read back and I was like, okay, so I guess we're doing this. We're writing a book. And that was 2 years ago. And I just pulled things from my life and like very much of my college experience and the mistakes that I made and the things I probably shouldn't have been doing, and kind of use that as inspiration, given not everything is true, because there are some crazy things that happen in the book, but a lot of it is very much inspired by my real life.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. If you want to find some more about that book and sort of watch its journey through the publishing cycle, you can find Joanne on Instagram at Joanne_A_Mason. And something that I love that you do as well, Joanne, is the Joanne Almonte-Mason newsletter, where you can actually follow the steps along to, the steps involved in writing a novel and trying to get that picked up and released as well. It does seem, from the outskirts, and when you're trying to go through this process, it really seems like the writing and the publishing industry is just like shrouded in mystery.
Yeah.
It seems to be a big hush hush secret of like how you actually get published, what to actually do. So it's really nice that you share that openly, and we get to follow along your journey.
Yeah, it's very much, I was very much naive to the publishing process. And in my head, I was like, you submit to a publisher, they love your stuff, it gets published within, 6 months. No, it's not that at all. You have to find a literary agent who then takes it to the publisher. You could be on submission for months. And then the publishing process, once you have a publisher, can even take up to a few years. So that's a lot of realization that hit me. I gave myself a deadline as to when I will stop querying and self-publish. So that is kind of coming up, and I'm like, well, I'm trying to look for options because I feel like the story, I want it to be out there.
Yeah. That's a good way of looking at it. Going down the traditional route as far as much as you can, but knowing that one way or another, you're going to put it out there. So, look, I think there's definitely an audience for it. I, for one, would love to read a story like this. So, yeah, best of luck with you on that journey, and I'm going to be following along.
Thank you. Thank you.
I thought we could start just doing a little Dear Diary moment. So just want to showcase that we are regular people with regular lives, and bipolar or, managing mental health is just one small aspect of what our day-to-day might look like. So I thought we could just both share like Dear Diary, what we're up to today or what we've got going on this week. So mine's a little bit chaotic, I think, Dear Diary. Like we're recording this on a Wednesday, so midweek, and my head's just spinning with all the responsibilities and everything I've got going on this week. I've just rushed the kids to preschool this morning, back to do a record. I'm studying a postgrad in psychology, so I've got an assignment due in a couple of days, a group assignment, so extra fun when you're working group. I don't know if anyone remembers group uni assignments, but the joys. And then on top of that, I got work as well. So my head's just spinning, and I have an insane diary scheduling every minute of every day, trying to get it all done this week. So that's my moment. What's yours, Joanne?
That does seem like a lot, like school and work and kids. I don't know how you do it. And I totally understand on how the need to have to write everything down, because I'm the same way, or else it doesn't get done. I forget. But at least for me, it's, work all week. I'm in PR, so I do that during the day. I have my kids running around every other time. It's the summer here, as far as there's no school, so they are home from school, and that's a lot, working from home and having the kiddos home. But yeah, and then I'm just trying to chug along with the book. So, and we're also prepping for school that starts soon. So that's kind of been taking up a lot of my time, trying to make sure we have all our I's crossed, or our T's crossed and our I's dotted, so that we don't miss anything for the first day of school.
Yeah, that's exciting. Is it, what grade sort of age are your kids going into?
6th grade for my daughter, and my son is going to be in 2nd grade. So it's a lot.
Oh, no, that's really cool. Well, let's continue down this sort of who are you path. So just sort of want to put mental health to the side for a moment and just find out a little bit
Mhm.
more about who you are as a person, like what you do for work, for fun, what your day to day looks like.
Yeah. So like I said, I'm in PR, been doing that for about 10 years now. Been married for 14 years in October, which still boggles my mind that I'm an adult because sometimes I can't wrap my head around that. Um, I very much, do the everyday thing, trying to survive life, hang out with friends. I try to read as much as possible because I know as a writer, you get inspiration from reading. So that's something I try to do as much as possible. But yeah, my everyday is kind of boring.
Not boring, just normal, just like an average everyday
Yeah.
responsibilities by the sound of it, with a little hint of
Hmm.
like passion and writing thrown in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, sounds good. All right, well, let's get into the mental health condition. So, do you want to introduce? Is it bipolar two that you are working with?
Yeah.
Let's say.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, do you want to introduce that in your own words? What that feels like, looks
Yeah.
like for you? What symptoms you
Um, s-
experience?
so I was officially diagnosed in 2020, but I lived with it from a young age, just untreated. And I remember when I was diagnosed, I very much did not accept it for months. Um, it was a lot of depression, irritability, manic episodes without me knowing what manic episodes were. So I just thought, I thought that I was the queen of the world. I could do anything. I was picking up hobbies left and right. I started a photography business, dropped that immediately once I wasn't manic anymore. And, you know, just was living with this thing that I wasn't accepting. And then in 2021, in January, I had a very much kind of I would call it a silent psychotic break of where very much suicidal ideation. I was ready to give up. And so I thankfully recognized the problem, and met with a psychiatrist and a psychologist and kind of decided to accept my diagnosis and really try to handle it and make the change to better myself. Um, and thankfully, I have it somewhat under control. I still go through times where I think I'm cured and I stop taking my medication and I get either really depressed or really manic. And then I have thankfully a very supportive network of people who are like, you know, medication is the way to go. It will get you out of this funk or it will get you to really take your life back in control. So, yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm glad you got to a point where you've accepted it and you're, getting help to manage it. What do you think made you resist accepting it for so long?
Well, so my mom she passed probably a week or two after I was diagnosed, or was it after? It was before I was, no, it was after I was diagnosed. And me and my siblings found out she was bipolar. And that was a shock. So when I was diagnosed, I was like, well, I'm nothing like my mother. I'm nothing like the experiences that I went through as a kid, which everything clicked after the fact of how I grew
Yeah.
up and my mom's experiences and my experiences with my mom. And so it was like I'm not like her, so I don't think um I'm bipolar, because in my head, I thought the way society depicts bipolar in media and things like that, that's what I thought it was. And so I was like, there's no way, like, I'm normal. And just, I wasn't willing to accept it.
That's a really good point. Symptoms do show up so differently for everyone. Even
hmm
two people with the same like bipolar 2 diagnosis could have a completely different experience of it. What specific symptoms of hypomania or depression do you find that you get more of?
For hypomania, definitely lack of sleep. Would I would go to sleep at a decent time around like 9:30 or something like that. But then, like clockwork, I would wake up at 2 and be awake till I have to wake up for the gym. So I'll just be awake until 9 o'clock that night again. And so
Yeah.
that is a really big one for me. Um, Definitely taking on different projects. Whether, again, like I said, I started a photography business not knowing what I was doing and just thought I can pick it up really quickly. Um, but then once I was no longer hypomanic, I dropped it. And that's kind of how the book came to as well. I started it, I got pretty far in it, and lost interest for a few months. And then thankfully picked it up again. But um, just that grandiose, I'm better than anybody, I'm the best person in the world, like just that mentality is something that really, I just thought I was overly confident. But the way I look back at it now, I'm like, oh, yeah, I was hypomanic. And then as far as
Yeah.
depression goes, I just get really, deep in that dark hole. Um, I'm not one to sleep a lot, but I will sleep and lock myself in the room and just cry, and very much not letting the people around me see me that way. So it's a lot of be happy around everybody else, but be
Yeah.
silently struggling, which, you know, not good, not the way I would advise anybody to take it, but kind of the way I experience it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I want to go into more about how you do cope with that publicly, but I just wanted to call out like even individual symptoms that you experience can be experienced so differently as well. Like with the insomnia, I'm also a big
hmm
like that's a big one for me as well, but mine's sort of the opposite direction. Like I just can't fall asleep. I can't switch my mind off. Once I eventually get to sleep, which might be around 2 in the morning, if not like pre-diagnosis, like I would be up till the sunrise and probably sleep for like 15 minutes before I have to get up and somehow get through a day. But just the way that's even so opposite is like you get a little bit of
hmm
sleep and you're up and ready to go, whereas someone else can't fall asleep and then could probably stay asleep more once they are asleep. But yeah, it's just interesting how it plays out so differently for everyone.
Yeah, and I don't come across people that live with bipolar disorder often. So like hearing like in other people's podcasts or other mental health advocates on social media, hearing the way they approach or they experience bipolar disorder is always fascinating to me because it's everybody experiencing it differently.
Definitely. All right. Well, you mentioned, you very much hide away with the depression and put on a happy face for everyone. What about with work? Because you have a 10-year career in PR. That's a very big, like public, shiny sort of work environment. What do you do when you're in the middle of an episode?
I always consider compartmentalizing as my superpower. I'm really good at doing what I need to do and then letting everything else fall away. And so I think that's how I've kind of, I don't want to say mastered it because this is not something that I necessarily wish this is how I handled it. But I'm very much of, I play the part for as long as I need to play the part, and then when I am by myself, that's when I kind of let it all out.
Yeah, I hear you. That must be difficult.
Yeah, it's not fun.
And yeah. Do you tell people at work? Have you shared this with anyone from your company? Like, how do you think they would react if they knew this about you?
I have not. I I think that's what I'm scared of how they would react. But I feel like if they find me on social media, they can like I have no qualms sharing it to random people on social media. It's the people close in my life that I usually don't talk about it often, or I kind of skirt the issue if they notice, like, are you hypomanic right now? I'm like, no, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. Same goes with depression. I'm just like, I'm fine. But with work, I don't know how comfortable I would be if they found out. I know when applying to work here in the States, it's very much they ask you, do you suffer from any of these chronic conditions? And bipolar disorder is one of the things on there. And I always choose not to answer because I feel like that shouldn't be anything important. Like, that shouldn't, especially for work, I feel like that's my health. That shouldn't concern you. I don't know. I think
We
that's
have
weird that
a
they do that here.
Yeah, we definitely have a different set of laws around that because I work in recruitment. So taking job
Mhm.
applications all the time. You can't ask that. That's that's not okay. There's a
Yeah,
lot
I
of
think
things that
it's
you can
weird.
and can't ask here.
Yeah, I think it's so, like, it's none of your business.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely should be that person's choice whether or not they choose to disclose that. I think here it's part of the unconscious bias is that, and the stigma, still very much alive and well,
Yes,
that if you disclose something like that, like, have you just ruined your chances of getting the job? And it's up to you to know, like, if you
exactly.
can and cannot manage that health condition and do the role, like, it's not up for your employer to assess whether or not you can do that when they don't sort of know what you are capable of.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I see it too.
Yeah. Well, can we go back to your diagnosis story a little bit? Because you said you got diagnosed in 2020. What was it?
hmm
What were you experiencing at that time that led you to getting help and getting the diagnosis? Like, what were some of those, I guess, early warning signs that other people could be on the lookout for if they were experiencing them?
One of the ones that I definitely clocked immediately was irritability, which I still think it's a little strange that that's one of the symptoms. But I'm very much a happy-go-lucky person. I'm more go with the flow. And during this time, it was to the point where I was always mad. I was always yelling at the kids, which is it's not something I do. I was any little thing was just set me off. And I was like, okay, this is strange. And then I don't know if you guys have NyQuil there. It's like a sleep, but it's called ZzzQuil here. It's like a sleeping aid. And for, I think it was 3 years, I took it every night. You're not supposed to do that, first of all, but I took it every night to help me sleep. And it had started to stop working. And I was, again, waking up very early in the morning and just laying there, waking up, doing the dishes, cleaning the house, all while everybody in my house was sleeping. Um, and I thought that was strange, just not being able to sleep and being fine when not being able to sleep. Like, I would be able to go about my day and function. And then very much the suicidal ideation was something that, you know, reared its ugly head. And I, not necessarily like my books, heard voices, but something was telling me I was not worthy. I was not supposed to be in this world. I was not, you know, somebody who deserved love from my family or anything happy. And I went in and originally just thought I was depressed. And just that's what I called it, because I did have postpartum depression with my son. So I just thought, oh, I was depressed again. But when I got to speak to somebody, we did like that long assessment where they ask you all the questions in the world, the most personal questions you can ask for. And when they were like, well, this is what like, I suspect, I was like, no, there's no way. Uh, that's not possible. Um, and like I had mentioned, I went months without doing anything about it. And even after I accepted it, I still went about 3 months before I told any of my friends, and 6 months before I told my husband. Why I took so long to tell him, I still don't. I think I was scared for how he would react. Um, so that was one of my big things. But now that I'm like, everybody knows, they are like my support system when I need them.
How did they take the news when you shared it with them? What was their initial reactions?
With my friends, it was very much it was great because they kind of did a little of their own research of like what it meant. And I also shared, this is how bipolar disorder works and things like that. And my best friend was kind of had that right away. She was like, that explains college. You were hypomanic all through college, it seems like. She's like, it just made sense for her. And I was like, yeah, like it made sense of how my adolescent experiences kind of were, because I was either depressed or hypomanic. And to me, I thought that was a personality trait. I just thought I was the fun person that, did crazy things and went streaking all the time and just like did all these things. I just thought that was me. Now that I'm on medication, I'm like, that's not very much me. I'm very more reserved than I thought I was. I don't know if that has anything to do with age, but I just, and then as far as telling my husband, he took it well. I got mad at him though, because I was expecting him to ask more questions about, what it means and things like that. And he's very reserved and very quiet. And when I told him, he's like, thank you for telling me. I'm here for you for anything. Like, I will be here for you when you're struggling, and I'll make sure, I have kind of keep an eye on you. But he didn't ask questions. He didn't ask anything. And that just made me so mad. I remember going into the bathroom and crying because I was expecting just a different reaction from him. And then I spoke to my therapist, and she's like, he supported you. Like, what better reaction is there? And it kind of like dawned on me. I'm like, you're right. Like, why was I thinking him not asking questions wasn't support when it was? So yeah, telling family and friends took a lot longer than I wish it would have, but I'm happy they know now, of course.
Yeah, that's great. That's great that they know and can offer you support now. Has in other ways as well, now that you've accepted the diagnosis, has that helped you being able to find the right sort of treatment or the right sort of way to learn about the condition and manage it to help you deal with it?
Yeah, for a long time before or after I had accepted it, I did not want to do medication. I was against it in a sense of like, I don't know why I was against it. I just didn't want to do it. And so I went a few months just trying to do therapy, trying to get coping mechanisms in place, and I was still struggling a lot.
Yeah.
And so that kind of prompted me of like, okay, maybe medications for me. I think I was scared that I would be a zombie or a robot while on
Yeah.
medication. And so when I finally started medication, of course, those beginning few weeks, it's very much like you're a little bit in a fog trying to think, at least for me, trying to navigate, what might be the medication or what might be an episode, or like trying to distinguish the difference between everything. But like that was the route I took, and I feel like I'm happy. I'm, you know, way more stable, or like I like to say, like even keel. Like the medication isn't always like I still experience episodes, but they're just not as extreme as they would be if I wasn't on medication.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that. The more of like these conversations I have with bipolar people, it's a very similar sort of reactionary experience. I think a lot of us have trouble accepting that diagnosis right away. I know for me, it took me a
Mm-hmm.
good, like, I would say it made a difference right away because I, was able to take a lot of that mental energy away from like trying to figure out what was wrong with me. It was just like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm bipolar. Okay, I don't have to stress about what it is anymore. I could just deal with the symptoms themselves. But
Mm-hmm.
it really took a good 6 years before I had sort of fully accepted it. And I was the same as you. I sort of learned through therapy, I learned a few techniques like CBT and everything of how to reframe it and how to deal with those negative emotions, and really like yourself, just
Yeah.
tried to tough it out, and sort of think my way through it. But
Yeah.
reached a point, post having my second child where, yeah, I was really struggling as well. But I actually went, before deciding to go on medication, I actually went for a reevaluation. I went and asked to speak to a psychiatrist again. I just wanted to be double sure that that's actually what was going on with me before I tried medication.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is part of that, I think, comes to stigma as well. There is that perception
Yeah.
of what medication would feel like, and this whole sort of zombified
Mm-hmm.
version that is super sensationalized in the media, and that maybe that's some people's experience with it, but that wasn't your reality. Like, that just wasn't my reality either. Like, I'm so
Yeah.
glad that I'm on medication now, and I really wish I'd done that years prior as well. Like, it just didn't need to be that hard. And the more people that
Mm-hmm.
I'm speaking to have this very similar sort of acceptance trajectory that you've mentioned as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It was definitely took time, but I'm happy I got there sooner rather than later, so that I can get help sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Yeah, good. Um, what's one thing that you wish people understood more about bipolar?
I guess it would be that to break, to separate how social media and how the media, movies and TV depict it. Like, I'm not saying it's always wrong, because I've seen things on movies or TV where I'm like, yeah, that looks familiar. But a lot of the time it's just to such an extreme that people, when they find out I'm bipolar, they think, oh, are you going to act that crazy too? And it's like, no, no, that's not how everybody
Yeah.
experiences bipolar disorder. So I just wish there was more of a clear understanding of the misconception. And I know that that's not always going to, that's something, we're always going to struggle with, is that misconception of bipolar disorder. Um, but I'm hoping that by being an advocate and being open about my experience, that I help educate other people that may not understand it.
Yeah. I think it's really important, and especially someone like yourself, like you've got a family, you've got a stable 10-year career, like you're well put together, you have like a novel that you're releasing, you've achieved like big things. Like bipolar doesn't have to ruin lives. It's
Yeah.
challenging and hard to live with, but you can still come through and do pretty well with it. So I think that's really
Hmm.
important to have realistic portrayals of what it actually looks like so that people can accept it and get help if they do experience it as well.
Definitely.
What's the best way that others can support you if you're in a high or a low? What do you actually need from people?
Um, Definitely from the people close to me, to not be afraid to call me out, to not be afraid to be like, you're kind of a little out of control. You're very you seem like you might be a little hypomanic when I'm rushing my words and can't catch my breath, when I'm um, bringing ideas that don't necessarily make sense or are well thought out. When I am in that low, to call me out and be like, are you taking your medication? Because usually I'm not when I'm in the lows. So just to be aware with me if something seems like out of whack.
Yeah, that's good. And the more people you're comfortable sharing it with, the more they're able to do that. I think
Mm-hmm.
it is hard. It's hard to be self-aware when you experience those moments because it does cloud your perception so much, and it does sort of take you away from yourself. So yeah, I can see how that would be really valuable, just having people just remind you to be mindful and check in with yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. And is there any accommodations that you'd like to see in school or work or just in society in general that would make living with this condition easier for you?
I think without having to disclose that I'm bipolar, I wish, because I have been in the boat that I have let it get to a point where I was let go for jobs because I was not focused, or just long periods of time when I was in an episode to where I was kind of self-sabotaging myself. So I wish there were a way to communicate that in schools or in a job without being judged. And that's something that, again, I don't know if that'll ever be the case, because there's a stigma for that people are not going to easily let go because there is just this
Yeah.
thing that has been portrayed a certain way. Um, but I wish there were ways to communicate that you're having problems and struggling without being judged. That would be great.
Yeah, I feel you. And it feels super risky at the moment. Like I think we're getting somewhere. Like I feel like there are
Mm-hmm.
some leaders that are open minded. You know, there's more talk these days about high EQ, emotional intelligent leadership being a big thing. So with that, you know, should come a greater understanding. But at the moment it
Yeah.
still just feels really risky. Like you don't know this person particularly well. It's hard to know what someone's preconceived ideas of bipolar are and what you're potentially opening yourself up to. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I totally get that's really scary. I think workplaces need to do more to make it overtly known that this is an emotionally safe workplace for people to reveal things
Mm-hmm.
like that and therefore get the right accommodations. Oh, let's get
For
there.
sure.
Let's do it. Let's do this. Come on.
Yeah.
Great. Well, Joanne, it's been so lovely chatting with you here today. I wanted to just find out, last of all, what you consider the best and the worst thing about living with bipolar 2.
I think let's start with the bad. The worst thing I would say is the unpredictability. Um, I feel like I'm always waiting for the other shoe to drop, whether it's about to be a depressive episode or whether it's about to be a hypomanic episode. I'm kind of always walking on eggshells thinking you're going to rear your ugly head soon. So I just wish I wasn't always so scared of what may happen.
Yeah.
Um, as far as the best, I would say as much as hypomania can have its downside, I think the creative process and the creative jump you have with it, I do appreciate that. And it's not always good, but I think it just sparking random ideas, like I do appreciate.
Yeah, I can relate to that for sure. And I also resonated with what you said about the waiting for the other shoe to drop. Because I always feel, I've had this thought for years, that if I'm hypomanic or if I'm feeling good, I'm also scared of it because I feel like what goes up must come down. Like I always felt there was going to be a due to pay for
Yes.
feeling good. I was like, I'm going to have to pay this back at some point. I had a friend earlier this year earlier this year though, she actually said to me, I sort of was coming down off a bit of a hypomanic episode and I was saying like, oh, I'm really scared. Like I know it's coming, like I have to pay this back now. And she was like, no, you don't. Like you've done enough. Like you've already paid it. Like you've been low enough. Like just sort of, because I don't know if it was like a self-perpetuating cycle or, whether it was or not, like the thought's just not helpful to know that like it's coming back. So I really appreciated her saying that to me. And it was like, oh, like I have felt so low in the past. Like I've already paid in advance. Like it's cool. Like don't be fearful of it coming. Like, you can have this one for free. And it was just like a really nice sort of mindset shift. So just sort of put that out there in case it helps someone else as well.
No, that's a really good way to change perspective.
Yeah, I liked it. I liked it a lot. Well, Joanne, lovely to meet you. Thanks so much for coming on today. I just want to shout out again that you can find Joanne on Instagram at Joanne_A_Mason. Keep up to date with her book release publishing journey. You can subscribe to her newsletter there. And yeah, follow along on the bipolar writing roller coaster.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Thanks for being here, Joanne. Enjoying the Neuro Diaries? Every interaction helps break the stigma, so be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review on your favorite podcast listening app. Visit our Instagram at the Neuro Diaries Podcast and join our Facebook group to continue the conversation. Through sharing and connection, we can foster understanding, empathy, and support for all.